Hello everyone, welcome to another video on quick tips and tricks. I will give you 20 which you can follow in hoyacare during rain and in general. You can see that my built-in reservoirs have been emptied, as well as all the medium to smaller specimens have been removed from their cow pots. Why? Because I need them to get flushed thoroughly. And again, why? Because that would enable them new oxygen through to the roots, which will go with rainwater, as well as wash off all the existing extra mineral buildups or impurities from the roots and from its potting media. This will definitely give it new life and plump up your Hoya, that it will be enabled to absorb the next fertilizer. It will get more better through to all its structures. You guys know fertilizer can be absorbed through any structure of your Hoya, whether it be leaves, stems or roots. Sri Lanka being a tropical country, we will never know when this continuous rains cease to exist, but however, until then I will take the optimum use of this weather condition, making this to be the first point of this video, where I will advise you to seize every opportunity you get with rain to flush your Hoyas and giving it a new life. Rain also will give you a lot of yellowing leaves, which will give you a lot of work when it comes to cleaning up your growth space too. This is due to the rainwater being of the highest pH quality and purity. It will carry a lot of nutrition with the water that will enable your Hoya to grow and move on from any stagnant stage it might be living in. But at the same time, that nutrition it will be providing will not be enough for a specimen like this. And when your media is also flushed off from all the existing energy or nutrients due to rain, you might need to come out of your house and find a time and give it more fertilization. So you will not be experiencing yellowing leaves from your vine when one peduncle or more is reactivated. Because you know, to reactivate a peduncle, you need a lot of energy in your vine. And if you are not manually providing it, and if rain is not so sufficient with the nutrients it is giving you, the pinnacle will pull energy or nutrients from the nearby structures, which would normally be the oldest leaves. But in this case, the pinnacle has pulled in nutrition from the most nearby leaves. So the vine will do whatever it needs, but however, there is not only one pinnacle which has reactivated here, but 2 to 3 pinnacles. And close by to the fully formed buds, you are seeing another pinnacle which has reactivated for the second time after a bud blast. Then you can see the pinnacle obviously needed more nutrition, even more than maybe what you are giving it manually, which made it to pull in the energy from the nearby structure. This is highly natural and you do not need to panic. Therefore, just increase the amount of fertilizer that you will be spraying, because the rain will be anyhow flushing off the excess amount of minerals from its roots and its medias, and it is a cycle that you need to fulfill if you are seeing a lot of buds being formed. So guys, that's the third point. Rain makes the Hoyas more hungry for nutrition, which you must be willing to provide when it is needed. As the fourth tip, I will tell you what you must do when you need a specific function performed by your Hoya. Whether it be new leaves, more roots, or blooming, you can utilize different types of high component fertilizers for a very short period of time to trigger what I need, which I will go into detailing on my next point. But shortly, I use high nitrogen fertilizers when I want to get my plant out of a stagnation. That is a 30-10-10 I will be using, and I will use a high phosphorus fertilizer if I want more stable, healthy root system. That is a 10-52-10 which I will be using. If I want a trigger in blooming or a reactivation of pinnacle, I will be using a high potassium fertilizer, or a bloom booster you can call it, which is a K40 from what I can find here. This brings me to my fifth point. How will I utilize one of these fertilizers to do whatever I need? And how will I mix that fertilizer? So this bit of information is not for the faint of heart, which is the same reason all my Hoyas are dedicated to advanced growers of Hoya. However unorthodox it may sound to some, these are my personal experiences which has worked for me, therefore I would like to share it with you. In a situation where your Hoya has not been growing or not being rooting properly or not being blooming, I told you can use these high component fertilizers. Here I will take a bloom booster as an example. You might have sprayed bloom boosters before, and to the bottle specification, which it has not worked for you. What I did in a situation where I found difficulties in blooming one of my Hoyas was first to stop fertilizing as a whole and throw it to the wolves, that is the direct sunlight, which was really detrimental to some of the Hoyas. Therefore, I resolved into using my high bloom boosters, high potassium bloom boosters, as to the specification of the bottle or a little bit more. Let me tell you how I mixed it. Now my fertilizer bottle is of 2 liters. If the label advises you to mix in 1 teaspoon per 1 liter, which means I am supposed to mix in 2 teaspoons into my fertilizer bottle. What I did was I added in 1 extra teaspoon and I sprayed it every 5 days for 3 times, and I stopped it. Even if you go along the bottle specification, this is where you stop it. I'll tell you the reason. Even though the potassium is way high, the other components in that fertilizer is way low if you read the label properly. So going longer periods with high component fertilizers might not be a healthy solution in the long run. And within those 5 days, you cannot be spraying another fertilizer that would further confuse your plant in which direction you want it to go. Afterwards, you can resume with the same balanced fertilizer, whatever you may be using. But if this method does not work, it's because you have sprayed it on cuttings expecting blooms, which will not be possible. And even if smaller specimens will throw out panicles, they might not bloom, and you can send your plant into a severe shock. So this sort of fertilization I do not suggest you to use on smaller specimens, but matured bigger specimens if you want them to trigger a bloom. This brings me to my sixth point. That is, even though you see a lot of growth in your older or matured specimens, not all of their new vines which has new panicles will trigger blooming. Do not expect this, it will not happen. In very rare occasions, all the panicles would reactivate, like in a stress bloom, as I showed you with my Hoya carnosa, or any other plant which has matured, but that would only happen if the plant or your vine has good energy in it, and if that initial cutting that you planted or bought is a very good cutting. As I've explained to you in my former video also, cutting always matters. So if my methods do not work for you, do not blame me, because I have similar instances with my Hoyas also. And again, the Hoya vine will obviously do what it wants to do. The seventh point is for you to not touch the new vines or new leaves when they have not hardened up. Even though you really want to trellis it because the vine is too long, let it be. Especially if they have two new leaves like that, touching with our fingertips can transmit the oils on our skin onto the dainty and very sensitive leaf. So guys, do not touch your leaves or vines prematurely. The eighth point is you can utilize rain to trim your vine so it will grow better, because rain can induce definite new growth in your Hoya vines. Make sure you cut more into the fleshy parts if you are cutting dried off parts, so there will be a wound there which will be an obvious trigger to your vine to prompt new leaves, which it has done in this Hoya quinquenervia. If you remember, this was very bare at one point because of a root mealy issue where I had to repot and retrellis, and now it's finally triggering new growth and filling up the top parts of the trellis also. The ninth point is not to trellis your vines downwards. I might have repeated this before in my videos. Normally, since Hoyas are vines which are climbing plants, they should be propped up. In this situation where I have run out of trellis space, I have opted to just wrap it around, but there is one new leaf popping up which I don't want to fall. That's why I stabilize the vine even further around the existing trellis. In my 10th point, I will stress out how new growth happens in Hoya vines due to heavy rain. Heavy rain gushing on them will obviously be a trigger for the vine to grow new leaves and new vines, because as I've always told you, rainwater contains minerals too. The 11th point is when you have repotted, it is extremely necessary that you give it a wet and dry cycle if you are growing in a semihydro setup, which mine are, and my Hoya elliptica has been subjected into a wet and dry cycle, so it will not experience a root rot due to severe amounts of water than it's used to. As my 12th point, I will stress further on how a Hoya would try to stress bloom and why it would do that after repotting. Any plant will only try to keep its species going, and how will they do that? To enable a pollination. And how would that happen? From the reactivation of a pinnacle. So the first thing the plant will have in its programming is to bloom. We call this a stress bloom. However, what we must need to do is to discourage this blooming. However, it is not possible because this is a Hoya and not an orchid where we can take off the spike. Therefore, you can just focus on giving the plant high nitrogen or high phosphorus fertilizer, or both components high, until it stabilizes in the new media and the new surroundings you have given it. 13th point, I will stress about phosphorus. This is where I've advised you in my 4th point that I will go into detail in my later points when it comes to talking about fertilizer. Here, I use fertilizer and a high phosphorus fertilizer to enable better root structure. If you do not want your existing leaves to drop and minimize the transplant shock, you can spray your Hoya with a high phosphorus fertilizer, which is equivalent to a vitamin B that you know sellers or importers use frequently when rejuvenating and showing new roots of the imported orchids or Hoyas to their buyers. On the flip side, I will not use a lot of fertilizer if my Hoya is totally dehydrated. Let's say you receive your Hoya order after a long delay of being in shipping and you need to recover that. Same features are what my Hoya pentaphlebia is showing after a repot due to a root rot. Then thereafter, snails getting onto the roots and munching them, severely shocking my Hoya for the second time. And I lost a lot of vines that I have planted at the bottom, and you can see that this vine is very bare now. It is only a few leaves which remain very healthy, and they do not look all that healthy because of the sun stressing that will further undergo if it goes into a dehydration. So guys, that is a point I'm giving you. If your plant is in a severe dehydration, don't subject it to direct sun or delay it from being put to a shadier spot. This is highly detrimental, where you might lose your plant in this process. The 16th point is what I see very frequently when I watch these YouTube videos on new Hoya growers. That is, when you repot, make it count. Why do I say that? You have spent huge amounts in importing these Hoyas, but you obviously do not know how to care for them. Either you overpot them or underpot them, or mess with the potting media in trying to see how it has rooted. Please do not do that. If it has rooted, you will see from the transplant pots you might be using or from a new leaf or a vine. So therefore, patience is key when it comes to rooting new cuttings. The 17th point is, if you have aerial roots on your vines, that means your vine is somewhat mature. Then you can trellis it. Like what you see in my Hoya merellii, small leaves. It is sun stressing as well as throwing off a lot of aerial roots which I have not seen. But however, I find this okay, and I am leaving this be and utilizing my IKEA Omar as a trellis because I do not have existing trellises anymore. 18th point is to be careful when you are maneuvering a repotted Hoya. So an inorganic substrate you might be using, such as pon or something similar to lava rock and charcoal, will easily be disturbed if you do not have a top layer of pebbles especially. This can disturb the rooting process or the plant without your knowledge, and the root structure will be loosely sitting in the media. You guys know, whichever the potting media you might use, the root structures has to stabilize and the potting media has to reach every nook and cranny in your pot if you are to have a stable rooting ground for your Hoya. But when we have to flush or remove excess water or redo the rack or your growth space, you might forget this. Because I do, and I actually appended one of the cuttings from this Hoya elliptica. That is the reason I added this to the very bottom of my video, so I can show you guys and make you remember that the next time that you maneuver your newly repotted Hoyas. The 19th point is, if you have a lot of leaves in your vine, taking off a blemished Hoya leaf is totally okay. That will give you better aesthetics, and that is what I would do, as you saw just now. The final and the 20th point is, after a repot, even though you do not see new leaves, but if none of the existing leaves drop off, you can put your mind at ease that you have given it the proper conditions for it to transition into the new media safely with the least amount of transplant shock experienced. Guys, that wraps up the video. I hope I made myself clear and useful with these tips so you can utilize my ways and my methods in your Hoya journey. Thank you guys for watching and have a wonderful day wherever in the world you are. I love you all. Bye bye.